Our final day, actually final painting in our New York City workshop. We're at the Brooklyn Bridge. We painted a morning scene using the Manhattan Bridge as a theme on Front Street. And now in the afternoon we've moved over to the Brooklyn Bridge. The wonderful weather continues. We have a gorgeous, warm, sunny afternoon, beautiful view towards the city. But quite a few complications. Our view of the bridge, it's magnificent. You can see the grandeur of the bridge, and especially against the skyline of New York City. So one of the first things, well, maybe the most important thing, is to stand in front of the subject and sort of isolate an area that you feel would be a good composition. In this case, I'm choosing one of the main rises in the bridge, which has a distinctive quality, shape of the Brooklyn Bridge with the two openings and the span of the bridge running underneath. There will be some beautiful shapes of skyscrapers up and to the left. Similar application to the right, only with more sky and more space allotted for the right-hand side. And a bit of fun work underneath the bridge, showing the structures of the buildings in the distance, some alluding to some river traffic, and trying to create a feeling of scale by using those small shapes on the water and on the far shore. I've offset the bridge so that it's slightly right, and tried to create an interesting lead into the bridge via the road, and plan to support that with some shadow work under the bridge and on top of the bridge. So my composition is been set, and I'm starting to paint with some simple washes, some light washes, to create the change in the sky. The change in the sky is moving from a little darker aspect on the left side to a bright, warmer aspect as it comes down to the right side in the horizon. While it's wet, I'm placing a few warm tones under the bridge, hoping to take advantage of that as the painting dries and get a bit of glow under the bridge, as well as to leave some broken shapes on top of the bridge and whites on the far shore or underneath the bridge. And this underpainting, as I'm letting that dry, I'm going to let it dry so that I can come back and start to paint with hard edges and darker colors on the bridge itself to create shadows and a feeling of light coming across the Brooklyn Bridge, giving us that feeling of early morning. Now I'm making my approach with a lot of burnt sienna. I'm trying to evoke a warmth to the bridge, especially to contrast all those blues and cool tones in the background. Using a warm hue, you can effectively generate a forward feeling to the shape by using a little bit more of a warm color. Certainly darks do that as well. In this case, I'm planning to play the warm hues off of the cool grays in the background, and still paint the background as though it's being rather in shadow, backlit, or lit dramatically from the side, but using cool grays so that they recede, and then counting on these warm dark tones to bring the bridge forward. The bridge, this part of the bridge is already showing my center of interest, which is the distinctive feature of the columns rising up from the river and dividing above the platform. This is almost an instant recognition of this icon, which is the Brooklyn Bridge. And the angle that I'm using to create the road for the cars is maybe a little steep, I don't want the eye to just run off the side of the painting, so I'm going to have to, as I'm building the buildings, or creating the building structure back there, I'm going to have to be sensitive to that and make sure that I am able to stop the eye and kind of keep it at my center of interest. Another problem in this painting is all of the smaller buildings and roadways and rooftops and chimneys and water towers that we see on the far side. Our eye picks those up, and of course we enjoy that. And in some sense I want to replicate that by pattern work, by playing with some patterns. So as I bring this gray wash that you see now, as I bring it down, I'm going to be leaving gaps and leaving edges, broken edges, and all sorts of little things, little bits to give that illusion. I'm not going to be painting a road per se or a building per se, rather count on this leaving of light tones, light edges, broken shapes to create the illusion that yes, there's a lot of smaller things in there, roads, rooftops, windows, things like this that that actually break up the gray and actually give us a feeling of scale too, because they're so small in relation to the towers and to the bridge that these small bits, they help to create the scale. The problem I found in doing that is I have to keep it rather abstract and in part ignore exactly what I'm painting and just try for a feeling or a sensation of the roadways, and the smaller edges, so on. And to help me do this, I did something a little unusual, which is I painted with my back to the bridge. Number one, this helped me to escape the bright light that was beginning to fall in front of me. If I had been facing the bridge, I would have had strong sunlight on my paper, and this would have made it hard to see the values properly. I would have been blinded by the paper in one sense. But another positive that came out of that is that I was paying more attention to what was happening on the paper and making less effort to repeat what was in front of me piece by piece. I was sort of creating the city as I went. Some reference to what I was seeing, and I'd glance over my shoulder and look at the scene occasionally. But I found this to be a useful, I don't want to call it trick, but a useful approach to working out of doors. In one sense, our vision is so developed that we can perceive a crane or a window, half a mile away. We can see it in an instant. In another instant, we can see a blade of grass that's in front of us. So our eyes are very well developed, and our brain follows that. So the artist has to be careful to be selective about what they paint and be, I would say, be more with what's happening in the painting than trying to replicate what's in front of our eyes, what we see with our eyes. I know that sounds a little odd, but in truth, our ability to replicate what we see is very much lacking. We can do a certain amount, but we can do more through expression and more through simplification and essentializing what we see. We can express more this way. Think of it, maybe a good comparison would be literature. How much we can say through a few words. Many examples in poetry that come to mind. We can say an awful lot. Sometimes we can say much more and allude to much more and allow the listener, or allow, in our case, the viewer, to, in one sense, complete the painting by engaging their imagination in such a way. So for me, watercolor painting in general, maybe I'll say watercolor because that's my media of choice, offers the artist a chance to be a poet and be very um, brief and allude to something larger through their work by avoiding minutia, by avoiding unnecessary detail, and focusing on the essence and giving enough space for the viewer to engage with their imagination. If we were painting each edge, each detail, it's almost prohibiting the viewer to experience the painting. We're giving them, truly experience the painting. We're giving them so much information that the imagination is shut out. So that's what I've kind of wandered off track, but that's very much my feeling, and as I mature as an artist, is that certainly we're able to communicate more, communicate something more substantial when we leave out a lot of the information and allow our audience to, in one sense, finish the painting with their thoughts, with their experience, with their imagination. I guess it's a fine balancing point, how much to include, how much to leave out. And as soon as I start to feel things in my painting are reaching that point, of course I can see, I could add more boats, I could add more windows, I could add lines, I could add water towers, I could add this, I could add that. But as soon as I start to feel that the basics are there, I really look for a time to exit the painting and pack it up. In fact, what I'll do is, as I'm nearing the point, and it's actually pretty close to that point in this painting, the essentials are there. There's some details that I feel would contribute. Some of those details I will save for when I return to the studio. And I think that's a good practice for us when we're working out of doors, because our tendency, our habit, is to keep working and keep adding because we see it, because it's there, to the detriment of the painting, to the demise of the painting sometimes. So if you can accomplish the basic idea, the basic goal that you set out for, in this case, the light falling on the city and coming across the bridge, a bit of traffic underneath, is really at the essence of my idea. It's not, well, that's where it stops. That's where I would take a break. And so I'm adding a few details now to, in essence, see how they look as the paint dries. I'll add some wires. I'll add some smaller details. Oh, this flag is so important. We must add the flag. There it is. You can see how that, in one sense, defines that space, that whole space above the bridge. But the other things on the far shore, on the river, underneath the bridge, are left ambiguous. Even the activity on the bridge, cars or wires, some of that's included, a lot of it is going to be left out. The brickwork, probably leaving that out. I'm putting in a few of these things so I can see how they look and decide if I want to keep them or enhance them or make them more. This one wire, these wires coming forward, I feel are important, so I've tilted the paper and am placing them. I'll use a little light color to enhance the wire that moves through the shadows, and finish the project with a few lights, leaving some things to do. Those things would probably be adding a few more divisions to the buildings, Maybe lightening the area underneath the bridge to get a feeling of light bounce. It's looking a little dark. Some odds and ends. Not too much. I don't want to do too much. And we'll leave it at that. Feeling maybe incomplete a little bit, but if the essence is there, I don't mind that. That seagull is so important. Well, it was a fantastic week. I was joined by a group of outstanding people, and we wandered the streets of New York, painted in Central Park. We painted at Bryant Park. Now we're finishing up at Brooklyn Bridge Park. You can see I've softened the edge of the bridge and melted it into the city. I've added some relief underneath the bridge to finish it off. It's dried pretty well, so I'm pleased with the painting. I feel like I've caught the character of the bridge and certainly the stature of New York City. So it's been a good exercise for me. Hope to return to New York City in the fall and do a similar course in Central Park, Times Square, Bryant Park, and so on. So I hope you've enjoyed the series. I'm going to sign off on this one and tell you that you can find more tutorials and more exercises on my website. You can find a list of my materials and a brief description of what I want to do in this piece in the description of this video. I'm going to do a second piece of the Brooklyn Bridge in the rain and show you how we can take an image and essentially change it to represent a feeling of weather, of rain specifically. But that will be in the next video.